that song on her very first album. Remember Amy Grant? Years and years ago. Yeah. See, that's how old I am. The book of Genesis records that when the winds of the Spirit of God blew across the chaos of the unformed deep, that the new world and new worlds came into being. And in only 11 chapters in the book of Genesis, later, the Spirit blew across the faces of men and women as they were trying to climb higher and higher and higher and get to heaven, see God. A new world was created. A world this time where there were different languages, as God gave them all different utterances, as one version says. There were different languages, and the tribes began to form around those languages, and ethnicities began to form, and the peoples kind of began to migrate in those areas, and perhaps the world, as we know it today, with all the human population that's here, began to be formed at that time. Spirit was at work again in Mary's womb and at the cross of Jesus. And now the winds of the Spirit are blowing after his death, resurrection, ascension, after he has left his 12 there with instructions to stay, and the Spirit will come. And then what do we do after that, they may be asking. But the Spirit showed up and blows down the streets and the alleyways and the lanes and courses up through the avenues of Jerusalem, and a new world came into being. Imagine for a moment that you and your friends are hunkered down in a house on Antioch Way in Jerusalem. It's the Feast of Shavuot, celebrating the spring harvest. A chance to go to our farmer's market yesterday in Simpsonville, and the vegetables are coming in, and fresh strawberries are in. There's still a number left. They're starting to bleed out, but the peaches, of which I'm most loving, the peaches are beginning to come in too. The Feast of Weeks, it is called in Judaism. The Shavuot was one of the major festivals in Jewish life, and people came from everywhere to Jerusalem because that's where the temple was. They brought their harvests with them, their first fruits, their first harvests. They brought them to the temple as a gift to the staff there and as a thanksgiving to God for God's abundant grace. And Jerusalem was abuzz with people from all over the country, from all over the region they have come. So you and these other Christ followers find yourself there in their midst of this throng of people. And you're having your lemonade and your cookies, and you're waiting for something. Stay in Jerusalem, remember Jesus said. When you notice that gentle breeze beginning to blow. Not too noticeable, but noticeable enough. It began to pick up a little bit and push the trash down the street, and then it began to take on human form almost as it kind of wove its way through the streets and down one street and another as if it was looking for someone, perhaps. It went up Manger Street and crossed over Main and took a left on Galilee and veered right on Pilot Avenue and finally knocked at the door of the room where you are and where you're waiting, and before you could answer, it blew the doors open off of their hinges, and it sounded like the world was being created again. And then it was there that you saw the fire, the flames on everyone. And like Moses' bush from the Old Testament, no one burned up. And then things really got weird. Because people began to discover things about themselves. They began to discover that the old ways of relating to one another had changed, and their old staid ways of relating to God had changed and had been carried off somehow in that windstorm as it blew through your room that you're sitting in. And there was a new power at work in the lives of everybody who was there. It was a power that was like Jesus. That personal, not scary, not to be feared, but a power that encompassed everybody there and encouraged everyone there to walk like Jesus, just as he walked with you and us. This wind, this power, this spirit moved over the town and over creation, and you couldn't help but breathe it into your lungs, into your life. The Spirit made you like a newborn baby being slapped on the backside and taking that first big breath of big air. And life was different. The fire that was there, the fire was burning away the chaff and the hatred and the envy and the jealousy and the bigotry, the anger and the hostility. It was burning down the fences and the walls, the policies and the laws that separate us from one another as people. You remember when streets had sidewalks, a little bitty yard and a house and a porch? And people would walk up and down the sidewalks, and they'd wave to the people on the porch, and they'd carry on conversations. Nope, not today. Not in a lot of places. And we've become separated and estranged from each other. But that fire comes to burn away all of those laws and policies that separate us from one another. And everyone, I love this little word, 3 letters, all. Luke uses it, I forgot how many times, 12 or 13 times in this passage. All had something to say. Whether they were Cretans or Arabs or Palestinians or Jews or Syrian or Lebanese, folks from the south heard it, and folks from the north heard it, and security workers and nurses and residents of Kyiv and Moscow and Washington and Tehran, the engineers and the salespeople and factory owners and factory maintenance workers, everyone heard it. This new day was coming. The reporters who were there covering that festival, they called it a conspiracy. And it was. It was something new. When the wind and the fire broke down the barriers that had long kept them apart, and the people could breathe again. That spirit. And not just the stale air of the past. The air of which you didn't want to breathe too deeply for fear of what it would do to you or make you do to someone else. Not that air, but new air. Fresh winds of the Spirit that were blowing. A wind that challenges us and changes us and transforms us. A wind that infuses us, we who've been cleansed by fire, with a boldness the likes of which we have never seen or had before. And that boldness from the people of God can change the world. Maybe today, as you think about these texts, you might find the aha and decide that you've got talents and gifts and decide to use those gifts that might be a blessing to others in Seneca and beyond. Maybe you'll pray and be reconciled to that one who's been on the outside of your life. Maybe you'll offer forgiveness to the one who has done hurt to you. Maybe you'll find a voice and speak on behalf of those who have long been silenced in this community, and arms to lift up the downtrodden to their feet. All from that little room so long ago. I used to think that Pentecost was the birthday of the church. That's the way my Sunday school teachers described it. That's the way I've heard preachers talk about it. It was the birthday of the church. So we always had a red velvet cake. Is there one here? Next year. Maybe it's my age. But I no longer believe that. I don't believe that Pentecost is the birthday of the church. I do believe that it's a time when a world was transformed years ago, when a new world was birthed. And it's the same today. We celebrate that event and trust that that Spirit is still at work in our life, in our work, in this congregation, in your very life. You know, in the book of Revelation, John speaks about a new heaven and a new earth. That's today. That's Pentecost. And this celebration today is a reminder that as it happened then, that in the midst of the controversies of life, in the midst of pain, in the midst of vitriolic words that are spoken and hate that is pushed around, in the midst of death and the dying of children and innocence, that the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus Christ, is at work breaking down barriers, busting through doors, finding common ground, no matter the skin tone, political party, economic class, gender identity, all those have been wiped away. Paul says it best, we are one in Christ Jesus. The title of the sermon comes from the story of about a sixth grade girl in Sunday school class. When the teacher asked her what wind was, she said, it was like air, only pushier. A pushy wind. I see where you had some pushy wind this weekend here. I came through a torrential rainstorm on the way over, moving back and forth. Maybe, if we let it, the Spirit can do that here in this place and push us a little bit. Push us a little beyond our comforts. Push us a little bit beyond our thinking into new ways of understanding. If God's going to deal with the wreckage of this world and create newness and create wholeness, it's going to take a wind the likes of which we have never seen before. A pushy spirit wind that gets our attention. It's not a soft touch, a gentle, there, we'll take care of it. That doesn't offer newness. Business meetings that are confused as doing church won't get it either. A real stripping and burning away of who we are and what we are, with new clothing placed on us and with new righteousness in our lives, focused on the justice and hope and love. That's what's called for, because nothing less will work in our world for transformation. And the wind blows open our lives and pushes us out into the world beyond these doors. You're doing a great job with mission. I sat in on the missions work. Let's see how we can get our hands dirty maybe in some of that. It might hurt a little bit. It might not look pretty. The wind blew strong at my house last September as Helene roared through. I'm sure you have stories too. A live poplar tree in my yard came down. But it was the dead limbs that were up in the tops of the trees and the dead tops of whole trees that came crashing down as well, that caused all the ruckus in my yard. And I'm still today picking up from all of that. Leaves blew into the corners of the house. The yard art that my wife had put down came up and was in my next door neighbor's yard. There's still a whole lot to clean up, but the landscape looks completely different now, and I like it. In God's world, the Spirit's breath causes new worlds to come into being and changes the landscapes and the looks. Dry bones live and people are given new life. Unjust powers and principalities are toppled. New expressions of the church are discovered and newfound power in those expressions are enacted inside and outside the walls of churches. We're talking today about how to do church in this new environment in which we live. Remember the video at the beginning? Spirit-pushed people. Not folks with agendas, not self-interests or who are engaged in self-preservation, who want to keep it like it is, but those who feel the Spirit and let that Spirit take them where it will, can't stay inside. They have to go out to love and serve and hope and care and witness and pray and invite and work for God's peace in the world. Don't you love that? Defying the boundaries that our world sets up. You know what the 7 deadly words are in the church? We've always done it this way. Defying those words and actions and rules that keep us down. Folks who burn with the love of God for neighbor. Folks who burn with the love of God for each other and honor that love by worship and work and mission. Imitate a crucified rabbi named Jesus, who is now fully alive with the Spirit of God. And there is no stopping that wind. And this is our baptism day. May it be so in your life, this day and forever.